I want to give my expectations for the Jacksonville Jaguars going into this season. Now, this offense was really good last year, even though they do need to have way less turnover issues this year than what they had last year, but that's to be expected when you have a young quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is going into year 3, and a lot of people are expecting Trevor Lawrence to win NFL MVP this year. He's been a very hot name when it comes to the MVP discussion, and outside of Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, the quarterback who people think has the best chance of winning it in the AFC is T-Law. And for Trevor Lawrence, he right now is what I call ascension mode. And when your quarterback is in ascension mode, that means that all he does is keep getting better and better. And for Trevor Lawrence being in ascension mode and being mentioned in the MVP discussion, the Jacksonville Jaguars, let alone, should have a top 10 offense just based on how good Trevor Lawrence is expected to be this year. There's a good amount of people that I've talked to, Jacksonville Jaguar fans and non-Jags fans, who think that this is the year that Trevor Lawrence ends up becoming a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the game. And if he's going to end up doing that, it's going to be largely in due part to the wide receivers that Jacksonville has on the roster. Now, we all know about what Christian Kirk did last season, his first year in Duval. He had over 1,000 yards signing and free agency. And then you trade at the trade deadline for Calvin Ridley, which I thought was a huge steal for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, a lot of people were a little bit confused when they made the trade for Calvin Ridley. They were like, bro, what are you doing drafting Calvin Ridley? This dude is not going to play this year. He's suspended for gambling. Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars were thinking ahead. You got to think big, people. You got to think long term. So you get Calvin Ridley. He gets reinstated. This dude is about to go off. Like, if you don't have Calvin Ridley, my bad, y'all, but if y'all don't have Calvin Ridley on your fantasy football squads, what are you doing, man? This dude is one of the best route runners in the game. Not just that, but when he's on the field, he's insanely productive. And I was listening to an episode of I Am Athlete a couple of weeks ago, and Brandon Marshall asked Devontae Adams to rank his top 5 wide receivers in the game. And he had Calvin Ridley inside his top 5. That really surprised me. So if Devontae Adams sees Calvin Ridley as a top 5 receiver, why aren't more people valuing what Calvin Ridley is going to bring to the Jags offense? You pretty much have 2 number 1 wide receivers on this offense. You got Christian Kirk, and then you got Calvin Ridley, and then behind him you're going to have Zay Jones as your wide receiver 3. This is going to be one of the best receiving duos in the NFL, and not too many people are talking about it. I think Christian Kirk is a little bit undervalued because he plays for Jacksonville. He may not be the most flashiest player, but every time I cut on a Jazz game last year, he was going off. And now you pair that up with Calvin Ridley. If Trevor Lawrence ends up winning MVP this year, it should not be a surprise when you look at the 2 receivers he's going to be throwing to, and Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk. Now, you look at what they have at the running back position. You got Travis Etienne coming off a really great season, which kind of we can count as his rookie season because he didn't get to play under Urban Meyer. So last year was like his first year of really getting legitimate NFL action, and he didn't disappoint. He had 1,125 rushing yards, over 5 yards per carry, had 5 touchdowns. He also was a big threat in the passing game. Now, you drafted Tank Bigsby in the 3rd round out of Auburn. Now, a lot of Jaguar fans are really excited about what Tank Bigsby can bring to this offense. You're going to have somebody who is a little bit better running the football up the middle compared to Travis Etienne. He's not really a running back that's built for running the football a lot up the middle of the defense. But Tank Bigsby is a guy who is a really powerful and elusive runner. And a lot of people feel like Tank Bigsby never tapped into his full potential during his time at Auburn, during, the coaching turnover that they had, the fact that his offensive lines never were really all that good at run blocking. So going into this situation for Jacksonville, he has a clear-cut opportunity to run away with this backup running back job. And if he ends up being named RB2 going into week 1, we potentially could see him get a good amount of workload, because the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm pretty sure they don't want to run Travis Etienne down into the drain. And plus, Travis Etienne also can line up in the slot. So you potentially could have Travis Etienne out wide along with Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, and then have Tank Bigsby in the backfield. So Tank Bigsby, if he ends up panning out and living up to some of these big expectations that Jaguar fans are dreaming for him to have, he could bring a different dimension to this offense. You also have somebody who potentially could be better in red zone situations than what you were last year at the running back position. Now, Evan Ingram, he's having some contract talks with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We don't know if he's going to get a long-term extension or not, but he had the best season of his career undoubtedly last year, so I am expecting him to end up coming to agreement with a new contract for Jacksonville. But when he's on the field, that's just another weapon that Trevor Lawrence has at his disposal. And now you're going to have Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, and now Christian Kirk, along with Travis Etienne. Like, this is going to be a top 10 offense this year. Now, the biggest concern that most people have about the Jaguars going into this season is their offensive line. Now, your starting left tackle, Cam Robinson, is going to be serving a 4-game suspension, so you're not going to get him until week 5. So who's going to be replacing him? Well, that's going to be Walker Little, who already has played left tackle. He also can play right tackle, but he probably is going to be the dude who ends up substituting for Cam Robinson until he returns. And I think that you're fine at left tackle with Walker Little. Like, I don't think you're going to get elite left tackle play out of Walker Little, but you should get serviceable left tackle play. And then at your other offensive tackle position at right tackle, you got Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma, who was your first round pick from this past year's draft. So I think at offensive tackle, you should be pretty solid. Now, Anton Harrison, he's a rookie. We don't really know what to expect from him because he hasn't played a single down of NFL football. But Jawan Taylor is coming off the best season of his career undoubtedly. And it's funny at the time that it came, because last season was a make or break year for Jawan Taylor. He definitely cashed out in a major way and got paid. So Anton Harrison, you know, hopefully you have somebody who can come in and be a productive right tackle for you instantly. But even if he struggles, hopefully he ends up at least being serviceable for you. Hopefully you don't end up having a drop-off in production from right tackle compared to the play that you got from that spot in Jawan Taylor last year, who's now with the Chiefs. Now, I'm more worried about the interior of Jacksonville's offensive line. All right, now I like Anton Harrison. I think he should be pretty solid. I think Walker Little will give them some security at left tackle until their starter comes back in Cam Robinson. Now, I don't know about Luke Fortner. Now, Jaguar fans that I've talked to said, you know, he played pretty okay for a rookie, but he didn't necessarily blow me away. I guess for rookie standards, he was decent, but he could have been a little bit better. And the reason why I think that center is a big concern for Jacksonville and why they need Luke Fortner to have a really big year too is because when you look at the majority of teams that have elite offensive lines, it normally starts up front at center. Think about the Philadelphia Eagles. They got Jason Kelce, one of the best centers to ever play this game. Like, the best offensive lines in the NFL, more times than not, have elite centers. And then when you look at the teams that go the furthest in the playoffs, it's the teams that normally have the best offensive line. So for Jacksonville, if they're trying to win the Super Bowl this year, you're going to need good play out of your offensive line. Now, this offensive line didn't play bad last year, but I do think that if this offensive line is trying to help this team win the Super Bowl, they need way more out of it. And it's going to start with Luke Fortner. So if there was a guy who needed to have a big season this year on this offensive line out of everybody, I think it has to start with Luke Fortner at that center position. Now, at your two offensive guard spots, you got Brandon Sheriff, who could start to be showing signs of regression. Last year was one of the worst seasons that he had in his whole entire career. And you gotta remember that Brandon Sheriff has been one of the best offensive guards in the NFL for a very long time. So to see him kind of take a step back in 2022 is very alarming if you're a Jags fan. And then Ben Bartch, played 5 games last year. He got injured. In those 5 games, he looked better than what he did in his previous season. But I still think that he has a couple of ways to go. So when you look at your offensive line, you're going to be missing your starting left tackle for a couple of games. You're going to be starting a rookie out at right tackle. And then when you look at the interior of your offensive line, you're banking on guys like Luke Fortner and Ben Bartch being able to step up. And you could have a aging, regressing veteran and Brandon Sheriff. So I don't really know how I feel about Jacksonville's offensive line going into this season. I don't think their offensive line is bad, at least right now. But if I had to rank my confidence that I have in this offensive line from 1 to 10 going into this year, I probably would have it at 4. Okay, like I think that Brandon Sheriff could be on his way, to a huge decline. Father Time may end up catching up to him. Ben Bartch, we still need to see a little bit more out of him. Even though he did play better last season than the season prior, there's still more that we have to see from him. And then Luke Fortner, going into year 2, we need massive improvement when you look at that center position being probably the second most important position on that offensive line outside of left tackle. But overall, when you look at this offense in general, outside of the offensive line, this should be one of the best offenses in the NFL. And I expect the Jacksonville Jaguars to be a top 10 unit this year. You look at the talent that they have at receiver with just Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk alone. That's the top 10 wide receiver duo there. You got Evan Ingram, and you're going to have T-Law, who is expected to take a MVP kind of leap this year. This should be one of the best offenses in the NFL this year.